Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we have good audio. I am here. This is John Stritzinger, and I am here to discuss using the labs here at Swearingen for developing projects involving Visual Studio. These machines all have Visual Studio and they all have VS Code, but they do not have the REST interface builds in Visual Studio. So it's missing a lot of drivers in the core platform. Visual Studio Code, however, loads everything into your personal data drive, so you can download and install adapters and VS Code that you can't do in Visual Studio. So Visual Studio, anything with a VisX extension requires administrator access, so we can't add things like a SQLite modeler to the Explorer. However, if you do add the Entity Framework drivers and you put the right connection string in, Visual Studio will still work. So the Entity Framework drivers are essentially equivalent to like ODBC drivers and the like. So what I've been trying to focus on, since we struggled a little bit this fall getting our projects to work here, mainly because there are no databases on these workstations. So when you have no MySQL, you have no SQL Server, you have no Oracle Server on the workstation, it's hard to develop and work as a student here in the campus. And there are no hosts that we can use to develop software here. Whereas when I was at the University of Delaware, they have what they call the composers, and every composer had essentially a Unix environment running Solaris, but there were common databases on all of them that we could use, that we didn't have to create really anything. So anything that we built, we could do either on the command line or not. But these machines do not have PHP, and they do not have Node.js installed. And so you can't really run anything locally here and model your apps. And without a virtual machine, either here on campus or somewhere in the cloud, it's very difficult to do work. However, there are some things that I have been working on. There are two possibilities that would allow students to develop programs without a host. And there are two options. One, all these workstations have full loads of Microsoft Office on them, and they do come with MSAcess. So MSAcess is usually a premium tool for the rest of the world, and even in the enterprise now, they don't bundle it automatically anymore. So you have to buy it as an add-on like Visio. But here on campus, every single workstation has access, and so that is a reasonable possibility for students to use. The other thing I found is you can download and run SQLite on a workstation because it doesn't have any DLLs that you have to put into the protected directories. SQLite will run as a command line, as an app on Windows without administrator access. So as a result of that, there are two options here that work on campus. And essentially with these workstations, they all have 8 cores and 64 gigs of RAM. And so you can, in fact, use SQLite and Access to develop applications. So what I'm going to show tonight is that I have actually done that already, and I'm going to demonstrate that real quickly here. I'm going to share a Swagger tab. Let's see here. So Swagger is what comes with Visual Studio, and what I've done is I have built in the Visual Studio root directory. I've done three things. One, I've used the Microsoft Access default student database that comes with the application. And I've sort of stripped it down so that I just have the student table. I don't have guardians or anything else that comes with it. And I've just modeled that one API just for student. And then I built a SQLite database in Visual Studio, and I have modeled that as well, along with the default weather controller. So these all work. If I click on the weather forecast, then it runs the default Microsoft project. This is just randomly generated data, so it's not attached to a database. So I can run without a database, and I can run the student database, the student access table that I put inside the root directory. I can run that, and I can also run the movie environment that I created, so that we can really do anything now without any changes. So the other thing I did was I normalized the CRUD interfaces, the create, update, delete, and I have updated those so that they're normalized between MSAcess and SQLite, so that creating additional tables would always use the same format. So this is something that we theoretically could be taught in class that would have saved us on the order of 2 to 3 months per team. So I think this is sort of a valuable exercise. Not only that, but the databases are so small, they're like 4 or 5 megs, and you can put them in your root of your GitHub projects. And because of that, when you sync your GitHub, you can get the updated databases. So it's a much better way of passing data than using Docker or some kind of complicated architecture. So this is what I would recommend after going through the class as sort of lessons learned of what is possible. So this is the Swagger tool. I haven't demonstrated this before, so this would be a supplement to the project that I did previously. Now, you can see that when you run your API, it does come, and we are loading it here on 8008. And I'm just going to go through and show you what I had to do to the project. Let's see, I may not even be sharing the right one here, so let's make sure that I am not missing my entire demonstration here. I'm going to share the entire screen. All right, so in Visual Studio, I have stopped the project now, and what you'll see, I have the 2 databases here locally. ce.db is the SQLite database, and database 2 access database are both there in the root, and these are very small files. So I created APIs that worked, and they run to a local directory, which is kind of cool. The other thing I did is I uploaded SQLite underneath the root, so that if you were on the command line and you shell out in VS Code or in Visual Studio, you can run SQLite at the command line. That's included with the project, and this is less than 4 or 5 megs. And then I also updated all the dependencies. So this is where things sort of get interesting. You have to add, for Microsoft Access, you need these entity jet drivers, and for SQLite, you just need this one entity framework core .SQLite. Now I have sat through 3 months of a person that wasn't very well trained, in my opinion, and didn't really instruct on what the differences were between interfaces and services. As it turns out, the controllers is what builds the web API and not anything else. And so the interfaces and services are for code first models. But the database first, where you use SQL statements to create the tables and model and external tools, is much faster and more intuitive, and it's really what you have to do in your career going forward. So I think Microsoft's code first model is sort of novel, but it's, in my opinion, worthless. And that was essentially over 6 weeks of our class, I think, was wasted on the code first design. So I am definitely thinking that the class should be restructured. In any event, this is a working project, and I think I can call it a day as far as the environment and being able to do something going forward. So that's it for my presentation today. I am going to sign out now, and that will be my final sort of wrap up on the project. If you use SQLite or Access, you'll have a good experience. And all it takes is maybe a day to show you how to build the interfaces so that they all work. And then everything else really is a front-end design problem. So I think that's a different topic in itself. But the back end, I think I can replicate on anything that Microsoft supports. So Microsoft has its own drivers for Access or its own drivers for SQLite and for SQL Server, and even Oracle. The Microsoft Jet drivers were written by a third party, and I have sort of certified those. So I think everything works inside Visual Studio. The MySQL drivers are written by Oracle and another company, Palmetto or something like that. So anyway, they are not Microsoft drivers, and they don't work database first. So it forces you to use the code first model, which is, it's not impossible to learn. It just takes much, much longer. And I think it would require a 2-semester course before most of us would understand really what was going on. And that was probably 3 or 4 additional quizzes as well that we couldn't really follow along. Somebody just was going in and hacking on an interface that wasn't even in our book. So just my 2 cents for what it's worth. But we do have a new working project now, and I feel comfortable that I can build the back office very quickly. And I never had any concerns on the front end. It's just a question of getting Axios to work, which I will do in a follow-up. Have it working pretty much already. So I think we can have a solution there fairly quickly.